Coming up next on Arizona Horizon's Journalists Roundtable, President Obama visits Phoenix to talk about home ownership and the middle class. House Speaker Randy Tobin leads the fight over benefits for the families of the fallen Yarnell Hill firefighters. And another Republican decides to run for governor. Those stories and more next on the Journalists Roundtable.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon's Journalists Roundtable. I'm Ted Simons. Joining me tonight are Mary Jo Pitzel of the Arizona Republic, Mike Sunnix of the Phoenix Business Journal, and Jeremy Duda of the Arizona Capital Times. President Obama traveled to Phoenix earlier this week to discuss home ownership and the middle class. Mary, anything earth-shattering in this particular appearance?
Not particularly earth-shattering. He did call for winding down Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which have been troubled lending agencies. There's work already starting in Congress on that. And I think the sort of the wild card is that he brought immigration into the equation and talked about how getting our immigration system set straight will actually help homeownership. And
I want to get to immigration in a second here, but Mike, the idea of winding down Fannie and Freddie and asking for a bigger role for private capital in the housing industry, that was a little bit of a surprise, wasn't it?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, there's been some bipartisan support for phasing those out, winding those down. A lot of conservative Republicans have wanted to really get rid of those. Those things have been around for a long time. They've underwritten a lot of mortgages, and there could be a lot of impacts on things short and long term. It really seems like a good idea right now because of the troubles they've had during the real estate crash and the recession. But can the private markets take over that? Will they be able to take over that? Will they be willing to take over that? It can have a big impact on home ownership.
Response regarding, obviously the president was here a few years ago with some ideas, and it took a while for those things to get traction. His critics will say they still haven't really done what they were supposed to do. With some of these new ideas, preserving the 30-year fixed mortgage, making it easier for folks to maybe refinance, how did all this play?
Well, it depends who you ask. I mean, a lot of people, even some of the economists and folks that I talked to who like a lot of what they heard, said, that's nice, let's see if you can get this through Congress. Which, of course, is going to be the big question. The Fannie and Freddie thing, maybe I could see a lot of Republicans being very supportive of that. A lot of people on both sides of the aisle blamed them in part for the housing crash. So that may be able to get through. But there's other things like, allowing people to refinance their homes at the current rates. That needs congressional approval. Who knows? I think right now it sounds like they're going to focus on the things they can do without going through Congress, like getting rid of some red tape, making it easier for people who've lost their jobs in the recession to get loans. That stuff will probably have some fairly broad support.
Yeah, I mean, this president and this Congress haven't shown themselves able to get very much done. Budget, debt reduction, obviously immigration looks like it's stalling again. So yeah, they could do some executive orders. I think he just basically wants to get out of Washington, get away from some of the IRS scandals, stuff like that, get out there, kind of talk about the economy, talk about the middle class, which has been a strong issue for him both as a president and on the campaign trail.
Longest sustained applause from the crowd was on that reference to immigration.
Right. His point was that that immigrants, if they're legal, if they know that they are safe and legal in this country, they're more inclined to buy a home and create that kind of stability. The White House passed out statistics, talking points to many of the Democratic lawmakers who were there that said that immigrants contributed a 40% increase in home ownership over the last decade. Now, a lot of those are probably Canadians, sort of a different situation than immigrants from south of the border. But that
Alan Greenspan talked about this several years ago during the start of the recession when he was exiting. He actually mentioned this as a way to boost home ownership, to fill some of these houses that have been foreclosed on or sitting out there. So there are other folks that believe in this. The thing is are we able to get immigration reform done this year? It looks like it's repeating itself.
Yeah, that's why I was surprised that Obama brought that into the housing debate because, of course, the immigration reform thing has been stalled in Congress, probably been stalled in the House for a while. I can't imagine, tying this to the housing crisis is really going to get him anywhere with the people who've been opposing this for a while. I mean, it's such a tricky issue. There's so many things that so many people disagree on. I don't really see how this advances the debate among the people you need to convince over there.
Well, you did see some Hispanic folk activists out there protesting and complaining that he's not pushing hard enough on this. He hasn't been aggressive enough against the sheriff at times. And this administration has deported more folks than any other administration in the past. So there's some frustration kind of maybe on the left and Hispanic community that, boy, we're going through the same thing with immigration reform. It looks like it's not going to get through this year just by the tea leaves right now.
So the idea that immigrants mean more homes being built, more homes being sold, more homes being rented, this sort of thing. We haven't heard much of that particular argument, but he did come with facts.
Yeah, he did. And I mean, I don't know, perhaps, for those who want to see the economy improve and see a more stable housing market, maybe this helps to move the needle a little bit by, stirring in the immigration thing to make people realize that there are consequences, larger economic consequences.
Well, I think the argument is if you legalize folks and their citizens, their economic, their financial roots, their family roots all be here. They're not going to maybe send as much money back to their home countries. They're going to have savings accounts, bank accounts. They might invest, might start a business. They might buy a house.
It's funny, it's easy to see how the housing crash had a debate kind of impact going the other way when the housing crash happened, because you saw so many folks, so many immigrants, I think legal and illegal, leaving the state when that happened, when people stopped building homes. So if people start building, probably bring more folks, and maybe that creates more of a impetus for passing this.
One last thing about the president's appearance. Apparently there were no finger being wagged and pointed and confrontations. Apparently it was a nice little, but the conversation seemed to focus on getting federal aid up to Yarnell and areas in that particular area. And we just found out federal aid is not coming.
Right. The very brief conversation, because Governor Brewer had, really scant seconds on the tarmac to talk to the president, but she pressed the case for a decision on the state's request for emergency assistance for Yarnell today, perhaps after a letter that came from Senator McCain, urging action. FEMA comes out and says, and denied the state's request for individual assistance, saying that it's determined that the state has it within its own wherewithal, along with charitable contributions and community support, to handle this within the state boundaries without the need for federal assistance.
Is there a bit of a surprise there?
Yeah, I think so. Actually, I don't really remember too many of these things being denied, and something such of a high-profile disaster, fatal disaster, you think they probably would have done it just from a public relations standpoint and just out of the goodness of their own hearts.
Well, the Fed's saying that you can handle it on your own. Now we have a state lawmaker, a leader in the legislature, saying the state may need to also handle those seasonal workers who put their lives at risk and who die doing a job on state land. They have no other benefits. Talk about the Speaker Tobin and the Yarnell Hill firefighters.
Well, it turns out of these 19 firefighters who died, about, I believe, 13 of them were designated as seasonal employees, which means they don't get no pensions for their families, no health benefits for their families, and for obvious reasons, this is not sitting well with some folks, including Speaker Tobin, who's talking about running some legislation, possibly even trying to get the governor to call a special session. And I'm not exactly sure what he has planned, but whatever it is, I have to imagine that this is going to be very popular in both sides of the aisle. Chad Campbell, the House Democratic leader, was talking about wanting to work with Tobin on this. The governor the other day was talking about how distressed she was over what was happening with these firefighters. So once they figure out exactly what they're going to do and where they're going to do it, I presume it's probably going to fly through. But
that's the big rub, is we don't know. They haven't figured out exactly what to do, and where does the state come in to provide backup for local, in this case, like a local community such as Prescott that says it doesn't have the financial wherewithal to cover death benefits for these 13 who weren't full-time employees. And you start to get into all kinds of questions of, and then is it only for death? Well, firefighting, can take tolls in lots of other ways besides killing you.
And where was this argument back when these seasonal workers who put their lives on the line and go fight the front lines of these fires were signing these deals to be seasonal workers without benefits?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of such a piecemeal type system we have for fighting wildfires out here in the West. The resources, the equipment, the McCain and some of the lawmakers have asked for surplus equipment from the Pentagon, and you have these folks that are volunteers, semi-volunteers, professional firefighters, people to come in, seasonal folks, and it's a kind of just a patchwork that probably needs to be addressed at some point.
Will there be any opposition, do you think, to this?
Oh, probably not. I mean, at least at this early stage, this has all the trappings of the legislation that happened right after the Tucson shootings, when the legislature came back into session and they passed on a bipartisan basis a bill that would prevent the protesters from showing up at the funerals down in Tucson. They moved that thing through really quickly, and I would suspect that this would get that same kind of treatment.
And you mentioned there's a possibility, how likely though, of a special session going that far on something? Because, I mean, if not, you got to wait for the next session. You got to wait till next year.
Yeah, that might be a long time to wait. I mean, when we spoke with the governor a couple of days ago, I don't think she'd spoken with Speaker Tobin yet, but even without that, she saw news reports and started forwarding it to her staff and said, hey, maybe we need to do something about this. So it sounds like something that, if Tobin wants to bring people back, sounds like the governor will probably be maybe fairly amenable to it.
It depends on maybe when the families actually need the money or they're in
Right.
distress. If it's sooner rather than later, then the whole special session. If it can wait, they'll work on it right away in January.
Speaker Tobin has mentioned that, I mean, there are other efforts out there to financial fundraising drives to help the families out. If that's enough to at least tide them over until early January, then perhaps there's not a need for a special session.
That's why the FEMA declining the request is kind of a surprise, just considering the nature of what went on there, what's going on, all the attention to it. And, they approve a lot of disaster requests from a lot of states, and it's just kind of a surprise that they turned this one down.
Yes, but this one was different in that it's for individual assistance. It's not for, mopping up after a big flood. This is to help people rebuild homes and, get back into mortgages. And these are people... But to your point, these are people who don't have insurance. My colleague Mary Kay Reinhart was saying that they are much high, the demographically a much greater elderly population there, and the rate of poverty is much higher than statewide. So you've got some really stressed out communities there.
All right, Jeremy, who is Carlyle Begay, and where does he live?
Well, Carlyle Begay is the new state senator for District 7 up in northern Arizona, and he lives in Gilbert, or at least he has for the past 7.5 years, which is not sitting well with some folks, especially with Representative Albert Hale, who lost the appointment out to him. He was appointed to replace Senator Jack Jackson Jr., who recently resigned to take a federal job. Begay has lived in Gilbert for the past 7.5 years, but claims that he splits time between there and Apache County, where his other address is listed in Ganado. But he was registered to vote in Gilbert for a long time. He just re-registered in Apache County, I think just a few weeks ago. And possibly even worse for him is the fact that he was recently appointed just this past session to the Gilbert Industrial Development Authority. He was never sworn in yet. He hasn't been sworn in yet because they haven't had their next meeting yet. But one of the qualifications to be appointed to this is you have to be a qualified elector in Gilbert, which means he wouldn't have lived in Apache County, he wouldn't have met the residency requirements in that county to be appointed. And Representative Albert Hale now got a lawyer. He's going to court. He's trying to overturn this.
And who is Representative Albert Hale, and where does he live?
He is from St. Michael's. He is a former president of the Navajo Nation. He served in the Senate for, I think, 8 years. Then he was termed out, so he ran. He's been over in the House and applied for this Senate vacancy. Very interested in going back to the post that he used to hold. And he argues that, hey, at least I'd be somebody who would represent, who lives in the district. Here's the rub with Begay, it appears, is that the law says that, certainly you can have multiple residences, many lawmakers do, but you can only have one place of residence for purposes of voting, and the Constitution says you have to live in the county which you are going to represent for 1 year before you're elected. Now, Begay wasn't elected, he was appointed, but he has only been a registered voter in Apache County for 3 weeks, not for 1 year.
It makes you wonder, Mike. Apache County, the supervisors up there are supposed to be responsible for appointing these people, and you would think that they would check to see where they live.
Well, it's happened before with some other lawmakers who split their time, and he's telling folks, I'm a professional, I work down here in the Phoenix area, but I'm a member of the Navajo Nation, that's where my ties are. And it'd be interesting to see if this goes to court and if this kind of changes the rules at all, or if the courts find some gray area, or if it's a black and white thing, and they say, you voted in Gilbert, you can't serve up there. But he's going to argue that, hey, I have multiple residences, and maybe the fact that he's a member of the tribe up there, could help his cause a little bit in court.
I think what he'll be arguing is that this distinction between you must be a resident of the county for 1 year before election. Well, he wasn't elected, he was appointed. And this is a constitutional requirement, so what will the law and judges say about that distinction?
Now, ironically, Albert Hale's attorney in this is Tom Ryan, who we last saw challenging Representative Darren Mitchell's residency qualifications to get elected to District 13 last year.
It's awfully hard to find out where state lawmakers live anymore. It's Sounds like whack-a-mole.
Sometimes we
GPS
haven't driven up to Apache County to see if there's a mattress on a floor anywhere. But
Another question, Jeremy. Who is Christine Jones, and why does she want to be governor?
Why does anyone want to be governor? Christine Jones is the former executive with GoDaddy. She's the former general counsel, executive vice president. She left the company last year, and now she's looking to take a stab at the 9th floor. She just actually filed her committee today to run in the Republican primary, which is starting to get a bit crowded. But she's so far, I think, kind of an unknown in the political scene. She's never run for office. I don't know how deep her ties go, but people are wondering if she's willing to spend a lot of money for this, if she can get a lot of traction from the business community, which is going to be very divided between some of these other candidates already.
What do we know about her politics? Any elected public office experience at all?
I don't think so. I mean, she's pretty well unknown. I mean, a lot of the consultants around town have thrown her name about that she was going to run for something statewide. Doug Ducey looked at this too. Last cycle, and he ran for treasurer. Now he's going to run for governor. A lot of folks will tell these newcomers that run for something else besides governor and you can put that on your resume. Then you have this business experience. Plus, you can run for, you have statewide experience in an elected office. GoDaddy got bought out for, I think, $2.25 billion by a bunch of private equity firms last year. She might have got a pretty good
I would imagine so,
payday from that as being one of the executives there. She was going to have to spend a lot of money. The only thing that gave a big advantage is she's the only woman in the GOP field, and that would give her an advantage against these half dozen guys that are out there.
Does that give her an advantage, especially if she is not particularly conservative enough? I mean, you've got a lot of folks in that primary now on the Republican side, and there are certain hurdles. It seems like a lot you're going to have to cross. What do we know about her politics?
I don't know where her personal politics are, so I can't speak to where she falls on that political spectrum. But I think if you just look at a photo of the candidates, which there'll be these group shots eventually, the fact that she's female just stands out, and that'll matter with some segment of voters. I mean, hopefully, what will matter more is what she says and what she believes, not her gender.
Yeah, I mean, the gender, the picture will help. She's different, and people maybe will take a look at her. She got business experience. That always helps. But if she favors abortion rights, her stance on same-sex marriage, her stance on immigration, stance on guns, those are all third-rail bellwethers in the GOP primary.
Yeah, not much is known about her positions, but she has had a blog she's written for the last few years where she's got some things on there that I know even before she got into the race, some of my Republican sources are kind of raising their eyebrows over saying nice things about Hillary Clinton, about talking about the need for both cuts and revenue increases in the fiscal cliff negotiations in Congress, talking about climate change. So some of these things...
things that, the broad electorate might actually like.
And that's the interesting question on that is, could you have so many folks on the far right fighting each other and battling each other out, and she's over here in the middle or the center, if that's indeed where she is? Does that help her?
Yeah, but you could say the same thing for Scott Smith if the Mesa mayor gets in.
But he's not in. And again, everyone and their brother seems like they're in on this thing. So
they're exploring. If they're a current office holder, they're just sitting in the wings exploring.
That tribe of Republican and kind of moderate is really not around much anymore in our state. I don't think. If she's a viable candidate, has a lot of money, personable, smart, then she can make some waves. But she could be very much a newcomer and strugh.
Yeah, the question I think will be what kind of can she put together a good campaign? She's already got a guy who worked out for a number of big nationally known Republicans who's going to run her campaign. But beyond that, I mean, a lot of people are wondering if she can fundraise, because it's not unheard of to see a business person with no experience in elected office getting elected governor here. We did that in 1990 with Fife Symington, but Symington had very deep ties to the Republican Party. He was the party's finance chairman. He'd been making connections for years. A lot of people aren't really sure if Jones has that, so we're going to have to kind of wait and see.
A lot of people have talked about Bill Post, APS, Pinnacle West. He retired. He was chairman and CEO. About him running, he's on a lot of boards. He's on Thunderbird, all the chamber, all the Greater Phoenix leadership stuff. Been out there on education. That's how a business person kind of usually does this. You get out there and kind of work the community. You're out there. Your name's out there, and people know you. People don't know her really at all. And so that's going to be a big challenge for her.
People do know Will Cardin. He last was seen running running in the Republican primary for Senate, losing big to Jeff Flake. But he's back. He says he now wants to run for Secretary of State. Some see that as a de facto run for governor, the way things work out in Arizona. What's with that race now? Who else is involved there?
Oh my, well, we have Senator Michelle Reagan, who's exploring. We have Representative Justin Pierce, who's exploring. We have Representative Steve Montenegro, who is also exploring. All basically exploring because they can't, because of the Resign to Run law. That's on the GOP side. A couple of names rattling around on the Democratic side.
Leah Landrum Taylor and John Holbrook. Is Terry Goddard considering this? Have you heard that?
I think people are considering Terry Goddard for it. I don't know that he is.
But back to Will Cardin. I mean, we know he has the money, and we know he can spend the money. I mean, Secretary of State race is statewide. He's already got statewide recognition because he ran against Flake.
You're right, but he got spanked really hard in that primary. But maybe he learned his lesson. Maybe he learned some things. He's got money. The family has name ID. Their contributions to the medical field, to the community, to charitable causes. He's pretty well known in the East Valley. Maybe he's mended some fences, and yeah, I mean, he might have an advantage just from name ID and money in a crowded field.
Sure. I mean, he got stomped in that race last year, but that was a much different race. Jeff Flake was, a six-term incumbent, very well known, a lot of big money interests lining up behind him. Cardin was the underdog from day one. On this, I think if he comes in, you have to consider him the favorite from day one because, he spent $6.2 million out of his own pocket to run for a Senate race where he lost the primary by 48 points. If he's willing to put in $2-3 million into this race, I mean, I can't imagine he won't run away with it. I think some people are starting to wonder if some of these other candidates who are exploring might start taking a look at other races, actually.
But can't you hear the opposition campaign to that? It's like, so you're going to try to buy your way, into the Secretary of State's office. I mean, and we have higher contribution limits that are probably going to kick in that will make that perhaps easier to achieve.
All right, we got to stop
to get that message out.
Yeah, we got to stop it right there. Thank you so much. Monday on Arizona Horizon, we'll hear from an ASU professor and a student who both attended a United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And we'll look at a local organization receiving national recognition for its groundbreaking practices in dementia care. That's Monday evening, 5:30 and 10 on Arizona Horizon. And that is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great weekend.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Eight, members of your Arizona PBS station. Thank you.